this is JD with Eat My Science, and this is FAQ Friday. We have an interesting topic today, sugar alcohols. We'll be talking about what they are, what our body does with them, why we're going to be eating them more and more in the next couple of years, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. So sugar alcohols are rounding the corner for their 15 minutes of fame. They are popping up all over the place, and this is for a couple different reasons. First of all, we have shifted from a fat is bad, low fat mentality to now what we're going into a low carb, sugar is the devil mentality, and so sugar is getting a really bad rap. And manufacturers are switching over to sugar alcohols to kind of combat that negative image. This is coupled with some changes that the FDA made to the nutrition labels. So just as a brief overview, in 2016, the FDA made changes to nutrition label requirements. They're not technically, the large manufacturers don't have to have it completed until January of 2020. Smaller manufacturers have to have the new labels completed by 2021, but we're already starting to see some manufacturers changing over to the new labeling requirements. This specifically impacts sugars. So the new requirements say that manufacturers have to have a line item for added sugars. So any sugar that they've added in during the processing of the food, they have to put that as a line item so that consumers like us know how many sugars they've added to that product. Well, sugar alcohols are not technically a sugar, so they're not included in that line item for added sugars. I was at Target a couple weeks ago and they were doing a sample of a protein bar. So I grabbed a little square and I walked around down the aisle and I tasted it, and it tasted really sweet. But on the box it had said 1 gram of sugar. So I went back to the lady. I said, "Can I see that box? What is making this so sweet if there's only 1 gram of sugar?" So when I looked at it, I saw sugar alcohols. And I said, I made a mental note. Okay, sugar alcohols. This is a new line item in the new nutrition label. But there's a caveat, because if a food, such as a health food, is marketing that their product is lower sugar or low sugar or no added sugars or anything like that, then if there are sugar alcohols in the product, they have to have a line item for sugar alcohols under carbohydrates. If, however, you have, say, a cookie, and this is totally hypothetical, I have not looked at cookie labels, but if you have a cookie who has substituted out sugars for sugar alcohols so that they can put less added sugars on the label, but they're not marketing it as a low sugar or lower sugar food, they do not have to have a line item that says sugar alcohols. So it is going to be very confusing in the next coming years as they implement those labels, but by and large, we're going to be eating a lot more sugar alcohols because it's better for the manufacturers to show that they have less added sugars in the foods. So all that being said, what the heck is a sugar alcohol? A sugar alcohol is not a sugar or an alcohol. It is a chemical that is structurally similar to a sugar, but it has alcohol groups attached to it. It is made by taking a sugar and running it through a process that adds those alcohol groups. So sugar alcohols are found in very small quantities in some fruits and vegetables, very small quantities in nature, and pretty much everything that's added to our foods is made in a lab. It resembles a sugar, but its shape and its chemical properties are different because of the alcohol groups that are added. So what does our body do with a sugar alcohol? So when we eat regular sugar, as soon as it hits our mouth, enzymes in our saliva start breaking it down, breaking it apart into smaller sugars, and that feeds the bacteria in our mouth that causes plaque and it causes tooth decay. When we eat a sugar alcohol, our saliva doesn't have any enzymes to break it down. It's not something that we're used to digesting. So we register it as sweet because it's chemically similar to a sugar molecule, but it doesn't break down. So it doesn't feed the bacteria and it doesn't contribute to tooth decay. So you'll see a lot of sugar alcohols in sugar-free gums and candies, and even my dentist has recommended sugar alcohols. Once it gets down into our digestive system, again, it's not a chemical that is found a lot in nature. So our body doesn't know entirely how to digest sugar alcohols. So it might be able to break down part of the molecule, but not all of the molecule, and it's not all absorbed into our blood. There was a comment yesterday from Amanda who said, I don't know what sugar alcohols are, but I know I can subtract them from my total carbs to get my net carbs. That is based on the theory that we don't digest sugar alcohols, but that's not entirely true. Depending on which sugar alcohol you're eating, we could actually be digesting about 50 to 70% of it. So you might be getting about half of those grams that say sugar alcohols as carbohydrates. So it's not completely accurate to just subtract those carbohydrates from your total carbohydrates to get your net carbohydrates. Amanda, I see you just tuned in and I just talked about that. So depending on which sugar alcohol you're eating, we can absorb some of it, but the rest of it, our body has no idea what to do with it. So it gets to our lower intestines and our gut microbes start going after it, trying to figure out what can we do with this? Do we need to ferment it? Can we digest it? Can we break it down? It can cause, especially in sensitive individuals, or if you eat a lot of it, it can cause gas, bloating, diarrhea, a lot of digestive distress because it's not something that we can actually digest. And then we just excrete it from the body. So it all sounds pretty good so far, right? You put it in your mouth, it doesn't contribute to tooth decay. We can absorb some of it, but it doesn't have as many calories as sugar or as many carbs as sugar, and then our body just gets rid of what it doesn't digest, right? A good sugar substitute. Well, you know that I'm going to give you a big fat no on that. When I was researching this, it reminded me a lot of Olestra. I don't know if you remember the late 90s in the potato chips. They had a fat substitute that they came up with in a lab, and they put it in this potato chips, and then it came out that one of the side effects was anal leakage. That pretty much shut down that additive pretty quickly. It reminded me a lot of that. Yes, sugar alcohols are found in nature in small amounts, but not nearly in the quantities that we eat. And the ones that we eat in our processed food are made in the lab. They're not found in nature. So our body doesn't recognize them as something that we can digest. I talked about trans fats in my book, and it's a similar idea. The idea with trans fats is you take a fat or an oil that the body recognizes and knows what to do with, and you run it through a process, in that case, hydrogenation, which is also one of the processes used to make sugar alcohols. It changes the chemical shape and properties so that our body no longer recognizes it as food. And so many studies came out saying trans fats are bad, and now they're almost completely eradicated from our diets. I have a feeling that sugar alcohols are going to be similar to that. There are lots of studies being done about the impact of these chemical structures that no longer are sugars and how they impact our gut health. There's lots of studies still being done about the effects of eating something that your brain registers as sweet, but then not actually receiving the nutrients from that food. That can wreak havoc on the chemicals in your brain. That can cause lower dopamine levels, cravings for actual sugar because your body thought it was getting sugar and then it actually didn't. There's lots of studies going on about that stuff. So I have a feeling that it's going to be just like the low fat craze. Fat is bad. Now, a couple decades later, we're no healthier for eating low fat. Now, sugar is bad, and we're going to be pumping all this chemical and unnatural stuff into our diets. And a couple decades later, we're not going to be any healthier for it. So the FDA has approved sugar alcohols. Some of them are GRAS. They're generally accepted as safe. I can't remember exactly what it stands for. And some of them are actually approved. And in small quantities, other than the digestive distress that some people might have, it doesn't seem to have an impact on our overall health. But we all know that we can't always count on the FDA to help us out with knowing what's good for our body and what's not. So that is the lowdown on sugar alcohols. Now we know what they are, why we're going to be eating them more and more in the coming years. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the added sugars on the labels. And if you see sugar alcohols or you don't, there's a long list of added sugar alcohols that they can use that we might not even recognize. So the best bet is to, as always, eat whole foods, natural foods, not stuff that's made in a lab. Please, if you have any questions, I have lots of more information about this, so put them in the comments. And this is JD with Eat My Science. Eat well, my friends. Your life depends on it.